to the Organisational Committee meeting of the people's cell phones ringing in a meeting, but now it's that weird wormhole noise. Thank you, everybody. Right, we'll move straight into apologies, please. It shouldn't be anybody, because we're all here. Declarations of interest. Thank you. Public forum petitions and deputations. Haven't had any notification of any. Thank you. Confirmation of minutes of the 22nd of July. You've had those to look at. Just noting that Councillor Cook was present, but not listed in the those present in the minutes, but that has been corrected.
Thank you. Could I add that the 11th of June I was also present. It wasn't recorded in the minutes. Or rather, it was recorded in the minutes, but not in the header.
Oh, okay. Yep, because you moved and seconded some items.
9 times during that meeting.
So you're some strange ghost.
I think I was being ignored.
Yes, that wormhole. Any corrections or additions to the minutes? Not additions, corrections or comments about the minutes?
Apart from that, I was moving to
Thank you very much, Councillor Cook. Seconded Councillor McCallum. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you. Notification of extraordinary and urgent business. I haven't had any notification of any of those. Questions? None of those either. Chairman and Councillors' reports. Any councillors got a report? Great. Right, moving straight into item 9 / item 1, the financial report to 30th of June 2020 on page 13 of your agenda. Tanya, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. As I said on the front of this report, tumultuous year, unprecedented is a word that we've heard used multiple times. Flood emergencies, COVID emergencies, massive changes in our potential investment income throughout the year, continuous unknowns, 3, I think, or 4 different forecasts throughout the year as the situation changed. And you can see with our results that in the end, our last forecast was somewhat different to the final result as we come home on the last straight, perhaps positive statement. So I will just quickly cover off what those last adjustments were to the end of the year. Pretty reports no doubt. Many of the variances that we referred to through the year, all of them were the same. There's no change to the reasons for variance against budget. What changed in the end was the scale of the numbers as things became clearer at the end. I'd just like to perhaps refocus on the flood emergency that started in the week of early February. That had a very, very long tail in terms of getting the repair work done and then getting the administration and going through the cost claims with the insurance company. I must perhaps point out that the financial results here are draft, dependent on those final claims with NEMA and insurance. So we've filed up to $2.4 million for the infrastructure and nearly $800,000 for EMS. Many of those are agreed but not paid, some are not yet agreed. As we work through the process with them, of course, there's multiple claims now through NEMA with the COVID situation throughout New Zealand, and our claims with Aon have been progressed. Well, the first claim with Aon has been progressed to London, so we are really doing everything we can, but we have to wait, trying to progress it as fast as we can. So this significant work has been involved. We started with $1 million estimate in early March for the flood damage. It's going to be over $6 million. And so in the end, it's going to be financed by by shovel-ready projects that we're able to claim or to get in the process with. So a very big project, and it has been a constant moving target in terms of forecasting where it's going to end. What the effect on the council is, how much is going to be claimable, how much was infrastructure, how much was done in budgets, and which was going to be affected by reserves. So the result is financially is turned out to be a very good result. As I said here. So I just thought I'd like to highlight that because it has been a significant part of the total operation this year. Within that, EMS itself had $1 million loss as a result of the, $1 million of expense as a result of those two emergencies. The bulk of that has been claimed through NEMA. The result will be that EMS has a loss of $200,000 that is shared amongst the 4 partners as agreed in the agreement. So perhaps before I go any further with that, are there any questions just on that summary?
Tanya, can I just comment? So there's 2 parts to what Tanya's saying with regards to the claims with NEMA and Aon. One is the amounts in terms of, we've had indications that, we've done things in accordance with the guidance, so we think the amounts are okay. But as far as our annual report goes, the other critical thing is the timing. If the auditors don't have any certainty at the time of completion of the annual report, then they will want to qualify or be conservative, and they may ask us to take those amounts out of that, last year's annual report. So there's sort of 2 components to it that could have some impact. So we've incorporated the numbers based on what we expect we are going to be able to claim from them. But auditors being auditors, they need certainty and they need to be cautious. So if we don't have any indications from Aon or NEMA, then they'll be looking to back those amounts out, which would move them from year to year. That's a timing aspect of it.
So the 1.1 Tanya is our estimate of the final washer, with taking into account insurance claims as well as also claims against NEMA.
Yes. Yeah.
If I could answer that question direct here, that the 1.1 is our share of the EMS loss. That's the excess, the $500,000 insurance excess, and it was the YL flood damage, which is uninsured because of the nature of it. It's not wasn't in all the other work, and it's millions of dollars of work for river edge repair, has gone into the operational budget, as I suggested in the notes, that was absorbed as we refocused all the work to the work that was in front of us.
Councillor Cook?
Yeah, just a question about the expenses repayment, the tail, as you refer to, of the flooding and also the COVID costs should be shared by MPI and other government agencies because the emergency management were carrying out work on their behalf. So is that accounted for in your totals? And they should repay us 100% for those.
I'm sure about MPI. Angus is leading all of the work on cost recovery, and I'm sure that we've recovered everything we can, working through, majority I would have thought was through NEMA. So we have 100% claims, which we have certainly filed and been agreed. So.
Thanks. And Councillor Beard?
So just 2 questions on the balance sheet. I guess one of them does relate to, I think, the information you gave earlier, which you've got an accrual on there of 2.47 million. So that is under current assets, that is the insurance receipts that we're looking to recover in due course.
It's a little bit of the end of year accruals, but the majority of it is insurance.
So the other number that seemed to be quite a lot lower was the accruals under the trade and other payables. We're about $2.5 million less than the same time last year.
Yes. I can answer that if I can go through the rest of it.
Right, that's my question.
Thanks.
So, apologies, I just wanted to bring that forward because it has been a significant part of the year. And I think we've gone past it and it's easy to move on to the next emergency and perhaps not appreciate the extent of the ones that we've been working through. So on the 22nd of July, we had a forecast loss of 1.5 million for the financial year that we're talking about, and we've ended up with $400,000 surplus. I'd just like to point out to you what made that up, or what has made that up. We were originally predicting that we would the ES share of the EMS, lots of acronyms, the environmental self and share of the EMS loss would have been 400,000. Well, it's ended up at 116 as our share. The forecast was very conservative on what we could earn by way of income in this last part of the year, not knowing when we set this up that how much work we could be doing in the community. In the end, in the last part of May and June, our monitoring income came in ahead of that forecast because our teams were able to get out there and continue with their monitoring, which made several $100,000 of difference. What Councillor Beard is referring to is the costs accrued at the end of the financial year were down substantially on the previous year. The previous year was quite high compared to average. But saying that, our consultants and contractors spend, which tends to peak in May, June, was half of that of the previous year. And finally, there was a large amount of work, of income coming in that very last month from what we call local contributions towards the river works, river damage, where we were then in a position to tally up the total cost and the private share of that on the different river systems, and you appreciate that is reasonably complicated. Each system is different. So all of that came through literally in June and swung the numbers around from the forecast loss to the profit. I will quickly look at the balance sheet. Councillor Beard suggested the accruals there of 2.4 million. The majority of that was insurance and some end-of-year accounting. Managed funds ended the year at 28.3 million. Today it's 29.4 million. And trade and payables were less than the year before, but more in line with our normal monthly average. And you'd see that there's a $2 million difference there, or more than a $2 million difference between the 2 years. And that will come through in our forecast cash flow in the next slide. We'll talk about that, what that effect is. And if we turn to the last page, details, just like to advise committee that we have completed, I think we've advised previously, completed our paperwork and agreements with Debt Management Central. We've been hesitant to undertake any active collection work from April till now, other than reminders from ourselves. But just recently we agreed that we would start contacting our overdue rates people, because as rates come due again, this is only going to compound the problem for them and us. So we have sent out 1,600 letters through Debt Management Central, suggesting that they contact us if they have a problem with payment. And a list already of people who have paid. This is in the first week, so that would be expected. We do truly hope that people will take advantage of the opportunity to contact us and make arrangements to pay prior to the next invoice going out, which will be in October. We have $2 million of fees and charges going out this week for our annual compliance and consent charges. No, they'll be hitting the mailboxes perhaps next week due to the delay in mail, the timing. So that, Chair, is the end of that report.
Thanks, Tanya. Councillor McCallum.
I think well done, actually. I think considering all in all as you open your comments with what's been thrown at you, we've come through pretty good. And I've looked at the numbers, we're pretty close to expenses and income as budgeted for, and the investments have recovered a lot considering they've had some sort of whoopies along the way. But I suppose my question really is, what can we learn from this current year? We've been challenged in multiple ways. Have we have we done what we said we were going to do? Have we forecasted correctly? Have we put the right pressure on at the right time? It looks like we've been able to pull some of those fourth quarter invoices forward, so we've got a better understanding of it. So I think, I'm sort of answering my own question by saying I think we've learned a lot in the past 12 months, but I want that to continue through the organisation, because I think that's important, because I can't give you any idea what's going to happen in the next 12 months, let alone further than that, because I think the world's in a very swampy time at the moment, stormy time. So I think we need to grab what we can now and take those learnings forward. I just want to make sure that we do that and not say, I wish we had, but we did do that.
I think it's a question for the whole organisation, Councillor, but there's a lot of work being done in the organisation on risk management, and a large part of that is focusing on recovery and understanding what we've learned from what we've been through. Financial resilience is a huge part of it, and I think we will address that as we work through the workshops for the long-term plan. It's just understanding maximum probable loss. Do we have sufficient reserves, insurance, and debt capability? Do we have an understanding of the recovery administration? And perhaps we'll do that differently in hindsight. We might engage directly with people to bring extra resource into that. They're all positive learnings.
Can I just follow on a minute here? The thing I want to make sure is that we capture, because with Waituna, we've actually tried to have a paper that says lessons learned on the way through, because we have a number of people here, they will come and go, but we want to keep the learnings available to the next staff member or the next person in an authority position. So we need to have that sort of reference point of the things we learned, so we don't reinvent the wheel twice, we're actually doing it once.
Our CE's asked for those papers.
Thanks, Tanya. I've got Chairman Horrell and then Mr Robinson. Oh, and welcome Councillor Roy.
Ms. Darley, just looking at that, the debtors and the sundry debtors. Quite a few things we've got some that are paying, not paying the rates, but there's historic things that aren't. A few years ago, we used to have a prosecution subcommittee. I'm just wondering whether it's similar thing where we can actually ask these people to come and talk to perhaps Rob himself and yourself and Neil. We just may get a bit of traction. There's obviously some deep-seated reasons why some of them aren't paying, and that was actually, they took it away from us. It was an extra tool in those days to actually send a bit of a message, and I'm just wondering whether something like that may actually help, because that is a significant amount that we've got sitting there, and we've tried debt collectors and things like that. But that personal approach just may make a difference.
Are you referring to the rates or the sundry debtors in the 3-month comment?
I think probably more the sundry, with some of the sundry debtors, I know we've got some historic ones that are still sitting there that for one reason or another they're actually paying their rates, but they're not paying other things. It's just, at the end of the day, the other rate payers are subsidising some of those things that are sitting there, and if there's another way we can move that, it would be worth looking at.
Some of those sundry debtors in there, and there's not too many to be fair, have process underway, whether it be a consent application, or cost review, or perhaps something else going on there. We have had success with a very large debtor. This time last year we discussed that payment has not quite half what it was last year, as we reached agreement with that person and their bank. So we have tried the personal approach. In some cases they're just intractable and we will be in court. There is no other option. One has challenged us. But if we feel there's an opportunity to do that, we will consider that.
Thanks. Bruce and then Alan, thanks.
Thank you. Look, Tanya, just firstly, well done. This is, Lloyd, this is much more, well, it's better. Can I say that about front compared to where I think we started the year? So well done. I need to say that, Tanya. Well, me too. I'm glad I can say that because I feel like we've got a much stronger sense of why we performed the way we have, and that is superb. And also, I sense now that with the work we've had to do, that we're starting to look much harder at our forecasting. And actually, I was going to ask a question about where this was relative to some of the stuff I've been involved in, but Neil's given me your latest update on your forecasts, and I now realise the forecast 1.5 deficit is what you've had rather than the previous time I was involved, which was about 4.8, which was the original QEB advisory stuff. So that's really tremendous. I mean, I guess I'm making a statement rather than a question, but it strikes me that we have to take that further into our disciplines for going forward. And the one question, Tanya, and I'm sorry that was to you, but Neil and I put up before, it does say to me, it's interesting now that we know, and well done on having the June position, and while this is affecting the nature of our balance sheet, it still goes to the core of our strategy going forward. We do have an annual plan in place that made certain assumptions. And actually it says that as we come up to the end of our first quarter, I hate to say that in the new year, and I know we've got to do an LTP, what does it mean for the current year? And look, I agree with you, Neil, the fiscal position, the presumed income less expenditure is going to be what it's going to be because we've already set that in train, but our balance sheet's better. So what does that mean? So there's I hate to say it because I mean, I guess that'll get wrapped up more primarily with the LTP, but that LTP only takes effect from 1 July next year. Is there something that affects us this year? Would be an issue, Tanya, that I would be to know at that stage. So it feels like I'm asking, will we look at that? And how do we fit that in when I know that you're also trying to do we as an organisation also trying to do an LTP?
I can answer, Chair. The first effect is on cash flow because we
Yes,
finished the years with $2
So
million.
it'll become an item,
a year.
yeah. Which is tremendous, and it certainly means potentially we've got more managed funds, which means, who knows, the market potentially more interest. It starts to change things. I think the thing we have to learn, Lloyd, is actually how do we keep that agility in case there's a chance to change track during the year for the better.
I think,
That's all I'm trying to reflect.
I think what I'm picking up from Bruce here is that effectively our starting point is so much better, so we're in a better position as we move forward, and the possibilities and opportunities are more focused now. So I want to learn what we've done in the last 12 months and actually take that forward with some more, because we're going to make some changes. Neil, I understand about how we focus on this on a quarterly advance, but that's actually really important. So I'm really pleased where we are.
That's great. That's good news. It's how we capture that and build on it, I think is the key thing.
Jane?
Excuse me, just finish this item with $2 million, while it will show in cash flow. In the balance sheet, it's a positive result for the catchment area because we were forecasting substantial additional expenses that would have been ultimately funded by their reserves. And so it's the not needing to draw down on those reserves, which will leave catchment in a better future.
Cool, thank you. Councillor Beard.
It's just a little more of a questioning on the debtors and that ageing. I know that we've had probably upwards of 250,000 collections out of those greater than 3-month debtors, so that's really good that we're starting to get some progress in there. You've also dropped your provision from 253,000 in May to 220,000 in June. Is that as a result of some write-offs we talked about last time, or have you adjusted it because of it?
We reviewed the list at the end of June, looked at what we had as provision for last year, and one of them was that substantial debtor I suggested, which is well underway, so we certainly adjusted it based on what was in front of us, and that's what we think it should be.
So again, be able to put that up with under the audit, you feel you should be able to justify that number?
Absolutely.
Thanks. I think we've had enough discussion on that one. Something like to move? Thanks, councillor McCallum. Seconder, please. Thank you, Bruce. All those in favour, please say aye. Against? Carried, thank you. Excuse me. Item number 2, investment report to 31st of July. Thanks. Tanya.
Thank you. It says here at the 31st of July, we had $28.8 million of investments. As I mentioned earlier today, it is 29.4. You might have, you are likely aware that the market seems to be heading skyward. I read extensively of international commentary, and there is not one significant forecaster who can explain exactly why the markets are so disconnected from reality, from, they say, Wall Street to Main Street. Nevertheless, the suggestion is with investment returns elsewhere being heading to zero or below, it's simply a need to be invested somewhere. The index, just for your interest, the index reflects a few of the larger companies. It doesn't reflect all companies. I did read the other day that 60% of those on Dow Jones are still under where they were in March. So it's not a general index rise. It's a number of companies doing very, very well and the rest of them catching up. So our portfolio is doing well. It's well positioned, and I would suggest that going into this, the adjustments that JB Ware did towards the end of last year were certainly very valuable, and they continue to monitor and be agile. They've made a few little changes, but the portfolio is doing well. What it will be this time next year, we do not know. We have forecast a conservative return from investment based on dividend and income stream only. So we are not forecasting to grow the portfolio, and we're certainly not forecasting to spend any of that growth. I think, which is really important. If we look at the bottom of page 19, it tells us where our 531,000 came in the month. 406 was from capital changes in equity. Sorry, from not capital changes. 406 came from equity, and 124 from the bond stream. The capital change, though, was significant. So it's up and down. We try and monitor that to understand how much of that is actually realised and unrealised growth each year. The year-to-date figure equals July. The rolling average for the 12 months, surprisingly, is 7.5, which is, again, combines capital growth and realised income.
Just ask from that report, the statement of position report, where you've got June and July, and the increase, decrease. Are those numbers off the right formulas, or are they, because those numbers don't gel with taking the two numbers from each other, as in the June, July movement. Those numbers are. I'm referring to the
Yeah, I can see that as we look at it.
movement between June and July doesn't align with what the increase, decrease is saying.
Should only be 500,000.
The 531 is correct. I apologise for the totals, so we can. I didn't pick up on that. Thank you.
Tanya, did you have anything else to say before the next question?
On to that, the commentary is, I think, self-explanatory. We do have funds sitting in the cash and bonds section. I think you can see there there's 4 million is in cash, term deposit investments with JB Ware. They've made that available for us, so as we indicated that we would potentially do it for $3 million. So the funding is there for us to draw down as we see that we need to.
Chairman Horrell.
Yes, it's actually, when you look at that graph, it's been a pretty tumultuous year. I note the benchmark performance against most of the benchmarks are probably as as good as we've seen. So that's actually quite encouraging with the way financial people have been dealing with things. I am a little bit nervous about the fundamentals behind the rises, but no doubt they'll be continuing to watch that, and it's with a very low interest economy around the world, people looking for a home to go to. I suspect we'll see more volatility coming up post-COVID as some of those balance sheets come through. People are probably buying shares with an interest that's above the thing, but I've got reasonable confidence that our managers are doing a good job at the moment. So that's quite an encouraging result, better than we would have expected 2 or 3 months ago.
Excuse me. No further questions. We'll get somebody to move that report, please. Thank you, Chairman Horrell. Seconded Councillor Beard. All those in favour, please say aye. Against? Carried. Thank you. Item 3 is the cash forecast. Tanya.
Thank you, Chair. So we've made the cash forecast committee to highlight what effect that better than expected result has had. And as Bruce pointed out, and Councillor Beard referred to, that we're opening the year $2 million better than we anticipated with our last forecast. That means is that we potentially will not need all of the $3 million we're forecasting. So I say potentially because we have to stay agile. We just talked about, we have to ensure we have liquidity. We have to continue to be prudent. So we have left the money at the moment that we requested from the committee. We've left that with JBWare, but we may use that to offset those drafts as we go through, continually monitoring the returns of the portfolio and the cost of the debt, and the position of the cash flow. The unknown still in here will be our collection stream and our main rates take. We have put in place the 3 payment option for ratepayers. It's been ongoing now for probably 4 weeks. It's available through our website or by phoning us and coming in and getting an application. That will be promoted further as we get closer to the rate strike and the rates notices. Have information on how people can use that facility. And after that, we'll see where the cash flow flows.
Councillor Callum.
It'll be interesting to see the worst case scenario against this one. If we had everybody took that 3 payment option, because I think what's going to happen is you're going to take the top off amount effectively, and we're going to be sitting at or below 0 for a longer period of time. And what that means for the business, I'm not 100% sure. There's probably 2 lines of thought. One is that you spread your costs from a business perspective. The other is that you get out of the way so you don't have to go back and delay payments, and break payments are just a pain because they keep coming up and you don't expect them because you're not used to it. So it'll be interesting to see what our worst case scenario is against our best case, and then hopefully we'll guide somewhere in the middle. But there's nothing, that's exactly what I thought the cash flow has looked like for years. It's just where it goes up and down on the graph. So unless we make some fundamental changes to the long-term plan, that is their cash flow based on a 1 payment system.
Councillor Beard.
Again, I was just looking at numbers. In the accounts, we closed with our cash position showing it's 2.271 million. In the cash flow, you're saying the closed position is 2750. So there's about $500,000 difference between what we're saying in the account and what we're saying is our opening cash flow.
We use the 20th of July balance, Councillor Beard, for our opening cash flow.
So why wouldn't you choose something that was verifiable? Why would you choose that number?
Because that's a known number and it's after the creditors. So remembering that we used the same number for the last forecast at the same, different number, same date, based on the fact that we would pay our June creditors at that point. So I'm working 20 to the 20th, so I know what we're not having to take accruals from the June month and explain that. And
So you've used month 13.
yeah, well, we're trying to create a simple cash flow that uses accounting balances, but doesn't have to show movement in accruals. Explain and taking post-payment dates.
So just then the understanding of why we've got money sitting in deposit in an investment portfolio and cash receiving maybe 0.5% or less, and we're paying overdraft at 3 or 4%, are we?
Overdraft is 2.9, 2.7. Yes, well, we agreed that we would use the reserve, that the funds drawn down to reduce the overdraft, not necessarily limit. So yes, we can start to do that now. As I said, we're just remaining really flexible. I mean, we could turn around and put it back in the portfolio. But I would suggest that we, and I'm in agreement with you, we start to reduce the overdraft. We're still waiting for $2.4 million of insurance income. So the timing of all this isn't ideal, but it's
I just think we're not here to play the races, really. I mean, you can leave the money in the portfolio and make $1, or you can lose as well. If we have a known overdraft exposure, or a known overdraft position, it's probably more prudent just to pay your bills or pay your overdraft, and not I know we're not paying it safe with cash, but it's.
Okay, any further comment on any of that? Questions, really, not comments. Thank you, Councillor McCallum. Seconded, please. Thanks, Councillor Beard. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Item 4, deferral of adoption of the 2019-2020 annual report. Thank you, Tanya.
Thank you, Chair. The last item for myself. We're asking the committee if we can defer the adoption of the annual report on the 31st of October to the 26th of November to accommodate both the auditors and ourselves. Auditors have asked for a delay of 2 weeks. Given what we've been suggesting with the tail end of accounting for the insurance, it would certainly suit us to have more known numbers to finalise these accounts. It will not affect our ability to report to OPAC. We are continuing to do that. We have internally produced our July reports. We will be producing our August reports for management. So we will continue to do that. We have the new statutory deadline is 31st of December.
I'll move the recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Cook. Thank you,
The reasons given.
Councillor McPhail. All those in favour, please say aye. Against?
I actually wanted to get a question, sorry, mate.
Oh, sorry. Put it up higher.
Well, we are where we are, and I think if I can say from my work elsewhere, all of they're going backwards, which is fair enough. I understand that we were well warned. Is that impacting on us dealing with the LTP? There's a flow-on effect from not being able to get business off our table, and if we're another month with an annual report, which we are obviously, and I've got no trouble with the motion, but does it have a flow-on impact in terms of our capacity to, for instance, progress the long-term plan? No? You're shaking your head, Lloyd?
No, well, through you, Chair, I think the discussion that we've had in the workshop so far, we're still coming down to the actual numbers. We were delayed yesterday because we got tied up with some other stuff. The financial one's still coming forward. So my impression is no. In actual fact, we're taking these numbers as draft pencil, and we'll just move forward. If there's a fundamental change, that'll be impacted in. So I think the work program and what we're trying to do, we aren't at that level of detail, so no, it's not impacted. That would be my answer.
Neil?
So I'd agree completely with Lloyd. So keep it in mind, this deferral has been brought to us from our auditors. It's not saying that we were unable or are unable to prepare robust draft annual reports, which we can then use for our LTP, and that's what Tanya and team have done. I don't think there may be a couple of minor amendments that have come through recently that might change what's been tabled here today, but I don't foresee it significantly changing our starting point that we would be working on for projecting. So we've still got to, for LTP, we've still got to predict what this year is going to do, how that's going to end up, and then that's our starting point for our LTP. So there's a lot of variabilities that you have to take into consideration, and I don't think that the delay on that's going to have a major impact.
I think I haven't really asked my question the best. The critical question is, what's the impact on management? So what I'm hearing is, which is good, is that we will retain our own preparation deadline in terms of the annual report. Bearing in mind, as we discussed sometime this morning, the numbers are moving around, and that's cool. Yep. Here's the benefit, we know where the movement might come. The critical thing is, what I'm hearing is that we will keep going at our timetable, which was effectively a end of October sign-off.
Yep.
The transaction cost for us is we've got Tanya and team have to deal with the auditors a month later than they anticipated. When we will be doing we will be wanting to get on with our other work.
Yep.
Okay, but the point is, we're saying the transactional cost has been minimised because we've done our work. It will be the time with the auditors, but essentially we're okay there.
You're happy to respond to that, Tanya?
I think if we're talking about resource, I think we need to acknowledge there is quite a serious overlap of resource required.
That's right, that's why that's my question.
To finish an annual report, prepare for a funding review /LTP, and prepare for shovel-ready projects.
So the do one, yes, of course.
In order to accommodate this, we are outsourcing some work. I do have an external contractor helping with the annual report.
Right.
Person that we've used for 3 years now, knows ourselves extensively. Part of the fees and charges work is looking to be given to a person in Canterbury. It's a small task, but it's part of getting the fees and charges preparation and policy work underway. So we do need to be mindful that we can't do all of these 3 things at one time. So we're using our resource the best we can, and using other people the best we can.
Oh, and my question is not a criticism of the hard yards. I'm just wanting to say there has to be a consequence from the audit going back.
Yes.
In a year in which we are, actually shovel-ready's come on top of us, and but most importantly got the LTP. And it's really just a question, risk-wise, are we still on an even keel? That's all. Sounds like we are, so what up?
Madam Chair, I've just been noticed in the chat, just to move on, Eric and Bruce, could they turn their cameras on, please, as a request from our IT people?
I'm not certain on how to, sorry, I'm IT illiterate here now, because
Just don't turn your microphone off.
I've got my notes on it, and I want to see them rather than anything else. Does anybody help me do that?
Eric, are you able to turn your camera on, please?
I've had it on, but I need to be put in.
Sorry, thanks, Ellen.
No, you're in.
You're in. You just need to turn your camera on, please. We have to vote on that motion. We've got a motion on the table, so we'll just wait until everybody's
Sorry about this, got people
sorted.
I was just trying to.
It's on now, Alan.
Yeah,
So
I can see Ellen twice.
Lost Bruce, but we should get Bruce in.
Just shrink it.
Just take it out of gallery view. You'll be able to move it over so that you can see pages.
I'll only give them a minute, me either have it on.
Bruce, we can see you.
I can see, you've got a halo, Bruce, it's quite
That's good, that's.
disconcerting.
I reviewed my notes so well I know what they are, so you've got my view of me and we'll keep going, how's that?
Thank you, we've got a motion on the table, which is to move the change of date. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carries, thank you.
Thanks, Tony.
Looking good there, Mr. Councillor Roy. Item 5, the annual vehicle report.
I'll bring that through.
Thank you.
So I'll take the report as read. Critical thing just to cover off is that it's in our policy to bring this report through to council. Last year we brought a report through to council requesting the replacement of 11 vehicles. We only did 2 at the end of the day. So I guess that's a significant thing to understand, is whilst the request is for council's approval to replace vehicles, it by no means it does not mean that we're going to go out and just automatically replace vehicles. There's still going to be a consideration to the situation and circumstances to whether that's still the right thing to do. One of the things that we have implemented recently is our fleet management program with on the back of eRoads, and so we're getting a lot more information about our vehicles. That's shaping up, and that will be used to inform our replacement strategy going forward. There are some opportunities in that space. We would seek to make sure we have the right number of vehicles, that we have an extended range of vehicles in terms of that because we've got we're establishing a good polling system, so we can people can access the tool of trade as they require it. So the hope is that we can reduce the number of utes in favour of more economic and more vehicles that generate less emissions. So the item, and you do have a table at the back there, that's showing from a policy perspective, the green colours are showing those vehicles that from a policy perspective are up for renewal. The green is on the years and the yellow is on the number of Ks travelled. So our fleet's getting a little bit aged in some areas. But our intention is to make sure that we're using our assets wisely and that we don't have more than what we need. I'm happy to take questions.
We've got Neville and then Chairman Horrell.
Yes, we have purchased most of our fleet, but I see we've got 3 that are leased. What's the policy there?
So the intention with those are the hybrids, and so there was to be honest, that did come through the council, but they are they're our first foray into really low cost or pseudo electric vehicles. Unsure of what the future is of the technology, so we're a little bit cautious to be investing our capital in them, because if there's no resale market in 3 or 4 years' time, knowing that there's lots of change in that space at the present point in time. That said, those vehicles are performing really well. So there's the staff are very happy with them, but I guess the challenge is, what is their resale value? So based on that risk, that concern, we thought it was more prudent to lease them rather than to purchase them.
And Chairman Horrell.
So I guess that leads on to my question. You only purchased 2, but actually walked through on lease, so probably actually replace 5 vehicles.
No, I think that those 3 on lease were the year before, I believe.
I've seen them coming into the car park the last 12 months.
All 19. So
2019, yeah. That could be correct. I can't recall exactly. generally, the replacements happen at the end of the year. In terms of this approval, it's sort of at the end of, so come May, June next year would be when we would be looking to do the replacement. And I can't recall specifically, and it's not stated there, but my belief is that those ones related to an approval, a 2018-19 year. And so it was at the back, so it would have been mid last year, but related to the prior year approval.
And it'll be interesting to see how they pan out and whether the leasing rather than buying depreciation, it'll something to keep watching, I guess.
Yep. Certainly from an efficiency perspective, their cost of running is down, and so this is the great thing is this is all coming through in these fleet management reports that we're starting to generate now.
Thank you. I've got Councillor McCallum, McPhail and Beard.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I suppose my biggest concern is we've got 35, we're out of policy in my view. We've got 35 vehicles in the green, we've got 18 in the yellow, we're only looking at 11. The oldest vehicle being 11 years, so that's way outside of the 4. And I know we went from 3 to 4 and went from 120 to 150 because of the modern vehicles that we did that last year. So I'm really saying, in short, are we getting the best value out of our vehicle fleet when we appear to, on the surface, be a long way out of policy? The second part there is I only really see one pool vehicle nominated, and I'm looking for a number of vehicles under the pool status.
Yep.
And I'm really questioning whether for an organisation this size, if I understand the numbers right, about 1 in 3 has a vehicle or access to a vehicle, whether that is the right approach. I'm thinking of a business that's had about 150, 160, maybe 170 at the peak of people. So I'm just wondering how well that fits. If I was redesigning this organisation on base 0, I would probably look at it at a different ratio. In saying that, I did appreciate having those down the bottom, those named vehicles, like to the chairman and the CE, etc., having that name there so that I understand that's part of the role and the job. I understand that, but in the organisational part of running the business, I just raise the question whether we're actually doing our best there. And I say that because I think we have quite a benefit over the general public because of our buying status through the organisation of local government, and we actually can do a lot more with their dollar value than the general public. So I'm saying, how are we doing the best we can with the opportunity we have in front of us?
Rather large question. I mean, for me, having the information come through now from the fleet management system is going to enable us to answer those questions. We've got to be a little cautious, and we've had these conversations before about, how many vehicles is the right number of vehicles. And to be honest, I can't answer that because, if we reduce the number of vehicles, then do we have some staff sitting around waiting for a vehicle to become available so they can go out and do their work? So, there are trade-offs if we reduce the number of vehicles. What I'm looking for in the fleet management reports are vehicles that are really underutilised. So, if you can, so we'll be able to identify those, and hence, those are easy ones that we can take out of the fleet. And then with regards to polling, we're working through that. Our expectation is that all the vehicles will be part of a polling system, although obviously some people, their job is in the vehicle, so it's going to be allocated to them all the time, fundamentally all the time. But all other vehicles are available for others to book as required. And I think that then leads into sort of what I was touching on is, if you have a look at the makeup of our fleet, it's largely utes, and that's because most of our staff go on, onto farms at certain times. When we set up the pooling, then we can diversify the makeup of that fleet a lot. And so, yes, we'll need utes, but there's a lot of, on road or on minor track driving where something like those RAVs that are more, far more efficient and generate less emissions can come into the fleet makeup. So in some regards, we're knowing that the information's coming, we have held off and, you know, to be honest, the time when we would otherwise have done, like the last year's replacements was on the back of COVID. So, and we knew that our financial results weren't flash, so it wasn't, you know, it wasn't timely to do that work. But I think being informed, you know, we can now start to shape it up to fit with the business requirements as you suggest.
I'm just wondering, Madam Chair, to follow on from that, is there an opportunity outside of this annual report to have discussion with staff, maybe in a couple of months' time when they've got a bit more clarity on some of the stuff, to actually help this process through, so that we're not dealing with it on an annual basis, we've actually got some workshop or something else that we can actually thresh out a little more detail on some of the stuff.
Are you suggesting we need to review the policy?
I think it would be good to look at how we approach, as Neil has suggested, our vehicle fleet, how we actually look at it with fresh eyes, and then build a picture up. And then the policy will come out of that a little bit more. Because I agree with Neil, there is vehicles in there that are quite old and are doing very little miles. We had that discussion before. We just need to flesh it out a bit more, but not in this forum, but in another forum, to actually help this process. But I think the discussion is on the table now. That's why I put it on the table, because we need to follow it up.
Yeah, sure.
So Chair, and just adding to what Neil's been saying, I guess we've got now got e-roads in place, which will help us get better information about vehicle use, and I think we already know actually some of the vehicles aren't being used, but this will give us some richer data. And so I'm suggesting after 6 months at the end of the year, we use that data and also do some benchmarking with other regional councils. We are quite unique businesses, so I want to benchmark against other regions to say actually what's your look like. And as part of a broader discussion about the future, and that's a lot of interest. So we'll come back to you to have that discussion on next year's.
Thank you. Councillor Maffeo.
Yeah, I think the words probably covered a fair statement, questions.
You may ask a question.
To be honest, traditionally, this is one thing I usually vote against,
Yes.
against as a matter of principle, but the reality is that probably since we've actually sitting around this council table, is that I think we've actually declined in vehicles.
Yep.
So we haven't gone up, so that's always a good thing, and we are challenging the systems. So, you know, I'm happy, and also that you're not, you know, showing that you've only replaced 2, you're allowed to do 11, you know, so some financial restrictions, just, you know, not blatantly just buying for the sake of buying too. So it's good to see all those things being challenged. I just challenge, obviously, we haven't quite got our chief executive into electric bike yet. That every year, I mean, that's going to be the ultimate.
Surely you will lead by example, Councillor Maffeo.
And I thought, wouldn't that be good, just come around his bicycle and putting it up?
Through you, Chair, I have the electric bike as well.
Oh, you want to pay for it?
So I paid that personally and trialling it on behalf of the executive.
I think you're doing the right thing, actually. Just keeping an eye on things, challenging it all the time, so it's good.
Thank you. Councillor Beard.
Yeah, I can't add too much more. I really just want to ask about that, the software that you're talking about, will that give the visibility of say, a fleet of vehicles? So like in the case of, if you wanted to book a room in a meeting situation, you can book a vehicle. So a week ahead, you know you're going to go somewhere, you book a vehicle, and you can lock that in.
Precisely. Yep, that's how the pooling system works. Yep.
And my final point about, I think that the chairman should be looking at something a little bit of a 216 Subaru too, so I think he should have something. And maybe it needs to be electric as well, or hybrid.
An electric bike for the chairman too, is that what you're suggesting?
We have hybrid on the sites for the exchange.
Thank you. Rob, did you still want to say something, or were you? Yep, lovely.
I'm happy to move with that discussion.
Thank you. Councillor McCallum has moved, noting that there are 2 parts to that recommendation. Seconder, please. Thank you, Councillor McPhail. All those in favour, please say aye. Against? Carried. Thank you. Item 6, update to the staff delegations manual.
So I'll cover this off. So this is essentially procedural with some name changes. So nothing great substance to cover off it.
Any questions
There's
on
any
that?
questions?
Bruce?
Is it name changes or and/or position changes?
Oh, sorry, name in terms of the named positions, sorry, not the individuals. Yeah.
I was just, look, it's not an area of my expertise, Neil, but I noticed they're in key areas relating to regulatory roles. I was just trying to work out, is this lowering the ability for things to be signed off in the organisation? Or are we doing this for spread? Focus for the rationale change in the delegation?
So these aren't financial delegations?
But they're regulatory, they create the ability presumably to sign off on regulatory matters. I was just trying to understand the attendant controls around that.
I can't answer that specifically, Amy. Do you have any sense of whether these were, so my suspicion, so not really strong, is that it's just, we've just changed the title of the role. I don't believe that there's a change of the tier or
Okay.
but, yeah, sorry, I can't answer it specifically.
Oh, that, you can see there, because corporate's taken out from the system.
Thank you.
Thanks, Bruce.
Understanding that, Chair, I'll move the recommendation.
Thank you, councillor Cook, who is present. Seconded, please. Chair Farrell, all those in favour, please say aye. Against? Carried, thank you. And we are zipping along to item number 7, the long-term plan progress report. Wilma, is that you? Thank you.
Councillors and Bruce.
Saying I've just disappeared. We've all gone.
I've got a link on it. Sorry, that means probably.
Hang on one moment, Wilma, because we've all gone. We're there, but we're frozen. And I'm reconnecting.
Off the screen, so yeah, looks like we've been hacked.
Good time for
Yeah, I'll have to go home.
This is a good time to break for morning tea.
Oh, do you want one?
I'm not sure.
There certainly was an unusual name on it, joined the.
We haven't got Thanks, Wilma.
So good evening, councillors and Bruce. I just draw your attention to some aspects in this LTP report for the final quarter of the year. There have a couple of trends changed in this report. Not surprisingly, there's a few amber signals in this report which relate to slowdown of work in the last quarter due to COVID-19 and the lockdown. So that's reflected in some of the work programs, for example, the policy and planning area, both of which are COVID related. However, you'll also notice that there was a change in the other direction inside consents and compliance, where their completion of work actually increased. And of course, you just heard from Tanya that that's also visible in the interview results. The only other ambers that are mostly in relation to ongoing trends that we face in year in relation to this work program, one of which is around science program, which has a series of levels of service and measures relating to a whole of Southland outcome, which is a measure that's very aspirational, and while work in that area is underway, it doesn't quite meet the sweet levels in there, so that's something for us to consider in our LTP ongoing planning. That's consistent with the whole of the result also for science strategy investigations. The only other non-COVID angle that I can find in here relates to the trend in relation to the air plan, undertaking our own planning process. And you'll see the other issue that Tanya raised about the wire flood costs, that's also consistent, that's quite visible in the result for the catchment management area. So apart from that, the work program's pretty much been on track, so there's no surprises in any of that outcome. As I say, some work slowed down as a result of COVID.
Councillor McCallum.
Thank you, Chair. Under the biodiversity one on page 37, it's been slowed down due to the complexity. I'm wondering, is some of the stuff becoming so complex that we're actually being stalled? Is it that our systems have got so complicated that it's hard to move forward, or are we approaching it the right way? Because you could actually say right now there's a lot of stuff coming towards us and people are just looking for clarity.
Yes, I did sort of wonder about the language around that, and I have to confess, councillors, that as a result of having the flu last week, I didn't have a conversation with Ali about that. I'd actually looked at her report. She had a press go at that report actually last quarter. I'm uncertain that it's necessary complexity. I have a feeling that that's a bit of misspeaking in this report. I know that when I spoke to her about the last quarter review prior to her writing this, that COVID actually got in the way of some of that work. So I'm not quite certain myself exactly what that refers to.
So maybe we need some clarification on that. But the other thing I'm seeing in here is, are we reporting correctly when there are things coming towards us like COVID, which was a national lockdown, or there is other things that are bigger than us that have actually delayed the work, and are we reporting it correctly? Because we're actually being delayed because of circumstances outside of our control. So you could say we've actually done our part, but because of a plan change or a government direction, it looks like it's been put off, and in actual fact it hasn't.
Yes, and I think that might be the case. So I don't want to put words in her mouth, but I do think that part of the complexity may well have been, the broader programs of work around predator-free and some of the other sort of collaborations with other partners. So I'm sure that may well in fact be the case.
So,
that's certainly the case with the air plan and some of the work that's coming at us from central government.
so if we could get some clarity on that to make sure we're reporting correctly,
I agree.
that would be good. But I think, look, you look at catchment, looks like it's 100%, looks like no one turned up for work. And if they didn't leave the office. I'm not sure if that's the right message, because I've been flat out there doing a whole lot of recovery work. Are we actually recording the work streams as well as we should be?
Yes, I think that's
So I
possibly
think
the case.
when I look at this, I'm going, actually, there's a lot of stuff here. We've got half on track, half on track. And I'm just wondering whether that's actually a fair explanation of our 12 months work.
Yeah, so in particular, the catchment one, I think reflects their, because I looked at that and thought, why is this amber? But it's amber because of its financial outcome for the end of the year as opposed to its work program. So, and I feel the same thing about science. Science has been doing its work and it's been doing the monitoring, but it's still not meeting a broader level of service which relates to the entire region. So I think some of that's about the work that we've been doing in the LTP as to how we set these levels of service and explain those measures quite apart from how we report them.
Yeah, just if I could, sorry.
Just on the biodiversity one, just following on from what Will was saying, the challenge there is around the number of partners involved in it.
Yeah.
And needing to get everyone else signed off and other organisations at different stages of their thinking. And I think, going forward, we'll have to look at, we need to have a collaborative approach, but maybe a level of service that focuses on our piece of that pie, because we want to be responsible, accountable for our effort.
Yep.
Not on behalf of other parties. So there's some learnings, but we've got Southern District, we've got other councils, and we've got some other players, trusts and things. And so it's quite a complex piece. Let's focus on that piece.
I take your point about salt.
Bruce?
Yeah, Wilma, and probably possibly in some sense follow on from Lloyd's. I hear your point a lot in here of the LTP, but my immediate thought of reading the paper was this is about our annual report. Okay, and in the face of an overt number of dots, Charlotte, not the colour that we want. Of course, COVID obviously is the big thing. Have we thought about what? We must have, because we're preparing a new report. How are we representing this? This is really important. This is our report card. It's the how are we reporting it in the annual report would be of interest to me, particularly these areas where we don't have green. And a follow-up question relating to the LTP. So COVID's delayed us. It's a bit like dare I say it, a territorial with a capital program not being able to carry out all their capital program and then carrying it over to the next year. What's the implication? Are we behind? In effect, that's what I'd like to know. So annual report and what's the implications for the 2021 year?
Yeah, that's absolutely fair.
Yeah. So my question is, how are we reporting this in the annual report? Because this is the annual report card, is really what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, so I think, councillors, you might recall the last audit's report, we had a slightly review of it. It came back to you. You may have noticed that some of the actual colours changed slightly in that report as a result of it, and I think some of that is just about the quality of conversation internally about how we report. So there's some management improvement that needs to take place there. And in this case, as I say, I was actually not the person that signed this report out this time, so I've not had that conversation with the managers, but having gone through it, I concur with the colour coding on this on the basis that those are the primary reasons for it. So COVID has definitely slowed down the work program in some areas of the business, and I think that will be quite transparent in the annual report. And I think that there are some issues to do with the amount of workers Councillor McCallum says coming at us from central government and from partners that we don't have control over. And I think that reflects two things. One is our expectations of what is possible when we set measures and targets. And a reality that when you come to the table with a lot of partners, that they also have their own pressures of performance in order to come together. The others are incidents like the Wairau flood that have resulted in works happening but budgets not being met. And so I think those will all be quite clearly annotated in the annual report.
Good, and I'm just looking, yes, no, look, that's fine, I won't take it any further. I'm always interested in actually what does the high level picture say then about how have we achieved this across the year? Are we on target, are we behind? Taking everything into account, but that'll be a different discussion.
Thanks. Rob, did you want to comment on that?
Yeah, and just adding to the conversation, adding to what Lynn was saying around, I think the chairman made the point around actually our flood control team, our catchment team, who actually, you know, we've had the biggest flood on record in the tower, and the old stopbanks stood up remotely well and kept the river mainly in the stopbank. That's got to be part of the story that we tell around, actually, how do we do this year? So this stuff's important, but actually there's a bigger story to tell around, here's also what happened. And of course COVID's in there as well, but floods, you know, I think that's gone off, you know, unfortunately COVID overtook that floods, we didn't get to tell that story, you know. So I'm really keen that actually part of our annual report that was successful. And so that's really good.
Thanks. Chairman Hoddle?
Discussions before, the trust system is really about our own performance, and we always need something in there for external factors, whether it's COVID, whether it's floods, whether it's partners, whether it's government's decisions that are affecting it. When you've got really changing the air plan, the government's biodiversity things being delayed, I'm just probably something we need to give a bit of thought to in the LTP is how we can give a clearer message on the report card. I mean, if it's us, that's fine, but if it's external, maybe we need a better way of describing it, because we've tried in the past to take out aspirational goals, which you're always going to fail at, and we'll probably improve on that a little bit. It is a complex piece, and it's for somebody to pick it up if they are interested enough to read our annual report. It's about able to give a clear message.
I agree. It's, one of the things that we are looking at, Neil and I actually got a few hours together this week just to look at the whole of the reporting framework for the organisation in terms of how we report. I mean, you'll notice that we've moved to including not applicable into this report card, because in the past the report had Mr. Lambert and things that actually we couldn't report against because of the phasing of the delivery of them. So it may well be, as you point out, there should be some other way of us recording what external pressures actually are when we need to stop something, because there's no point in working on it, like the air plan, as opposed to putting an amber light next to it. So that's part of what Neil and I think meeting tomorrow, I think, actually for a couple of hours.
Any further discussion on that? Somebody like to move that recommendation, please? Thank you, Bruce. Seconded by Councillor McPhail. All those in favour, please say aye. Against? Carried, thank you. Thanks, Wilma. As far as I'm aware, there's no extraordinary and urgent business.
Good activity plan.
Oh, sorry, the annual activity plan. Sorry. So item 8.
So I'll just cover this off. To be fair, this is just a rerun of the plan. It is on our workshop or work program in 23rd of September to revisit the nature and the structure of that plan, and have the conversation about the segregation or separation between quarterly financial reporting and quarterly risk reporting. So on the basis of that being ahead of us, I haven't sought to change this report significantly.
Councillor McCallum?
I'm looking forward to that workshop, but have you done a draft, what that would look like, so we can go in there?
Yes.
We've got something to work with, not
Yeah,
just a clean board.
Yeah, we've got a starting point for discussion. Yeah.
So the draft annual report's in the correct space there. September, October, when it's going to be presented late November now. We decided this morning to defer it.
That's the final audit sign off. I guess I'll need to check that with Tanya as to where, because we do have a meeting on 14th of October or thereabouts, whether we'll have a draft pre-audit one ready, because I think then the next one's 29th of November when it's signed off. So there may be a draft come before the audit, the final audit one.
Happy to move that with the.
Thank you, Councillor McCallum. Second, Chairman Horrell. All those in favour, please say aye. Great, thank you. That does actually take us to the end of the General Manager's Corporate Service Report. Don't have any extraordinary and urgent business, so we need to move into public excluded, please. Mel, could you share the reasons for that, please?
Reasons are to enable council holding the information to carry out without prejudice or disadvantage commercial activities, to protect the privacy of natural persons, to allow council holding the information to carry on without prejudice or disadvantage negotiations, including commercial and industrial negotiations. And that's for items 9 to 11.
I'll move the provision of public excluded.
Thank you, Chairman Hoyle and Councillor Cook. All those in favour, please say aye. Against? Carried, thank you. And